What's going on, everybody? It's your boy JRich, back for another episode of Across the Pod. I am, of course, here with my main man, Tom, my co-host, my guide for this FPL disaster that we're having right now for our team, because Ait-Nouri decided to get a red card after the whistle. Cucurella, another guy, Tom, that you've been all over this season. Great game, but another red card. It's been interesting this year when we talk about the red cards after the whistle, after the games. Very, very difficult when you're trying to make these decisions for your lineups. But we do have a lot to get into because we have to replace Ait-Nouri because he's suspended. And we have a lot of other things to figure out, like our captain's pick, which was an absolute disaster. A 5-pointer from Salah on Saturday, followed up by a stinker by Cole Palmer. But I don't know if you saw, Tom, he got that little bonus point at the end of the week. Very thankful for that after that awful performance from Cole Palmer. But how are you doing, my friend? And what are your plans for game week 17?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit similar to how Wolves players reacted, like a bit of an overreaction for the game week going on, all losing their head completely with Cunha and Ait-Nouri. See, Cunha took that guy's glasses off. That was pretty funny. I think he just shouldn't be banned for how funny that is. But yeah, it's nice to be back. I don't think there's loads to talk about this week. I say that every week and then we end up waffling on for ages. But I think there's a few key fixtures we want to target, a few key players we want to bring in. Like you say, Ait-Nouri replacements. There's a couple of teams which I think have a really good fixture runs, and I'm keen to get your views on those. So yeah, I think we can jump into the fixtures straight away.
So Tom, what are we looking at for this week? I can see Chelsea looking good. Fulham? Are we bringing in some Fulham masters this week? Because you have been very hesitant on old Fulham. I've talked to Iwobi. We've had Robinson in the team at points. But where are you at for this game week?
Yeah, I think Liverpool obviously looked like the best scoring opportunity there, and I just wouldn't own anyone outside of Salah, just given like the rotation and things like that. I just think Mo, and definitely like a good contentious pick for captain this week. I think that's going to be pretty unanimous across the board. Man United as well, looking a lot better, and we'll come on to Ahmad later on. Rashford coming out doing an interview, looks like he's not going to be in the team for a while, so I think it's going to be Ahmad kind of locking down the right wing position, hopefully. Bruno's kind of, for me, I got rid of Bruno from my team personally. I went with Isaac instead, just because I'm sick of him playing in like the 6, he's playing in the 10. It's like they're kind of messing around with it. And for that much money, I'd much rather have a starting out-and-out striker in Isaac than have Bruno Fernandes. I do think Ahmad is looking like he could be an excellent asset, especially with the fixture run that Man United have. The other teams, like you say, Fulham, I'm actually kind of on board with the Fulham train at the minute now.
Okay.
Jimenez is obviously pictured on the slide, but I had him earlier in the season. He is kind of like up and down, not really super prolific, but does get like the odd goal. Great in the build-up play, and I think when Fulham are playing well, it suits him. Muniz did come on and score a goal, and I think Raul Jimenez, if you draw a graph of his minutes, there's like a slow decline into like 60 minutes now. And it's kind of like at the point where I can see Muniz maybe starting and Raul coming on, or just continuing to go off at the 60-minute mark. I just think with their fixture run, he's probably still like a good option. But I mean, it pains, as much as it pains me to say it, I think Chris Wood might even be a better option than him at that price point. I know, yeah, that is awful. You feel awful saying that. The other ones to target, I think Newcastle are kind of on a bounce back. Yeah. We smashed Leicester, and then we did Brighton as well last night. So I think we're starting to click a little bit more. I think Isaac and Gordon are probably really good picks from there. And obviously Lewis Hall with a huge 15-pointer. So I think if you don't have Lewis Hall, great Ait-Nouri replacement. And I think Newcastle have some really good fixtures coming up in the next 8 or 9. So we'd be looking at him as well. Is there any other fixtures to you which stand out? You mentioned Chelsea, but outside of Palmer and Jackson, is there anyone else there or any other fixtures?
I mean, the only thing for me is, how do you feel about the Everton clean sheet, right? Because a lot of people have been on Chelsea defenders. You've been on Cucurella. We have Colwell in the team, and they didn't get the clean sheet, which has kind of always been my fear with Chelsea. So unless you're going with a Cucurella where there is offensive threat, as you've mentioned many times, I believe he's like 5'2" right now. He went up in price over the game week and had a good week, to be fair to him. But do you think they can get a clean sheet this week to where you would look at Chelsea defenders? Because I personally am kind of off Sanchez. I'm off the Chelsea defense. If I can, I'm pivoting more to Arsenal defense. Liverpool, if you want, against Tottenham, not the best chance for a clean sheet, but it may come as well. And then, as you mentioned, Man United is the one that the fixture run looks great. They're very interesting, but I think selecting the players outside of Ahmad right now is very difficult because you know he's going to play. He's been great. He was unreal in the City game, but the fixtures are great as well. The price is good. I think he's going to continue to play. But outside of that, you know, people have tried with the defenders for Man United. I don't think it's a bad idea because they do have attacking threat. But the issue is you don't know who's going to be in the team. And then do you have any other fears of players midweek? One of my concerns was Timber did play the entire cup game. Everyone else for Arsenal rotated and played only a half, but I believe Timber played the entire game versus Liverpool, who I believe rested Verge and Salah, but I believe Trent played at least 60 minutes in that game. And I know we've talked about Trent as a guy we want to bring in, but the way they played last week, playing Tottenham this week, I don't know if it's the best decision, but it's one that we could discuss throughout this podcast.
Yeah, I don't know a lot of questions were embedded in there, but I think that was all pretty insightful. I think the one thing for me thinking about it this week is mentioning your point on clean sheets. I just like the highest clean sheet percentage this week is 38%, which is probably the lowest it's been for the full season. So I just think defenders just don't have the value they do have, other than maybe the Arsenal assets. Like you say, Chelsea won't keep a clean sheet, I don't think, at Everton this week. So I think you kind of want to go for cheap and attacking defenders. That's kind of like where you're going to get the most purchase. And like we said on the previous week's, Lewis Hall. I also think the other two Ait-Nouri replacements which I really like is Kirkez for Bournemouth, who I've got in my team. And I really like Munoz for Crystal Palace. I think Crystal Palace's fixtures after this week at Arsenal also look pretty good. And he scored like his expected goal involvement in the last few weeks has been super high, crazy for left back. Basically plays at left wing back, often gets into the box, most touched in the box for defender, I think. So I like Munoz, I like Kirkez, I like Lewis Hall. That's probably where I'd be at that price point for defenders. But the only other one which is worth mentioning is I really like Robinson for Fulham. Mm-hmm. We can have a conversation about Fulham assets in a second, but I think with their fixture run, actually I'll flick over to it now because this probably makes more sense. But I just think with their fixture run, you've got both Iwobi and Robinson, probably the two favourite assets. And then look at that run of like Southampton at home, Chelsea away is not a great fixture, but Bournemouth at home, Ipswich at home, West Ham and Leicester are both pretty awful at the minute. So a conversation we could have for Fulham. And I know you had Iwobi in a few weeks ago, so I'll probably pass over to you as more of our Fulham expert, but what do you think about that?
It's funny. So before we started this podcast, I was toying around with the idea of taking Semenyo out, who's the same price right now as Iwobi. And Semenyo's been a guy that we've been back and forth on for a while now. And then bringing in Robinson as the Ait-Nouri replacement. Now, I think it's only 0.1 million ahead because we have Ait-Nouri at 4.7 right now. We have Semenyo at 5.7. So it's a pretty easy transition for us. To kind of mitigate some risk and kind of move some assets around. But the fixture run is great, not just this week, but going forward as well. And Robinson's been amazing. I believe he's coming off of 2 assists in the past 2 or 3 game weeks, so he's been great. Iwobi, for whatever reason, he continues to score goals. I mean, some are gifted to him and some are earned. It just depends on the week. But he has been great. And just another asset under 6 million in the midfield that the key to FPL for me this season is, can you nail down the correct 5-6 mil midfielder to augment the Sakas, the Palmers, the Salahs, because I think that's what makes the difference right now. And so it's having the right guy there, and it's whether it's Ahmad or Iwobi. I kind of love both those guys right now, and pivoting off of the Rodgers, the Semenyos, and then I still have Enzo, but again, he's a cheaper option if that's what you need for your team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's quite a nice way to put it, is the teams this year are getting really, really template with Saka, Salah, Palmer. It's kind of like who's taking up your other spot, who's taking up your other striker spots. And if everyone's got Isaac anyway, it's kind of like Jackson. And then it's, well, who you getting as your other spot in the mid. And I think that's probably a quite nice segue into a question I wanted to ask you about. We had this question last week.
I know.
Who is the best around 5 million price point? Is it? And you can see like the points per million in the last 6 game weeks, how good Enzo and Ahmad have been. I personally, in my own team, are looking to pivot from Rodgers to Ahmad. I just think with Man United's fixtures, with his form, with that position locked down, and probably the confidence going into the next game, Villa haven't looked super fantastic. Rodgers hasn't been great, tougher fixtures. It just seems like a perfect point to pivot off of Rodgers for me.
Yeah, it's a very natural pivot. And like you said, whether you want to go with Ahmad, who's probably the easier choice, granted the fact that people have Jackson, they have Palmer, maybe they have Sanchez or Caldwell or Pucaré in their team. you can only bring in 3 Chelsea assets. So Ahmad is a perfect pivot as a guy who's cheap and I think will do a lot in his own right. Whether you want to have more Man United assets, as I said earlier, it's going to be tough. But I think Ahmad is probably the answer for a lot of people. We already saw him rise earlier in the week, and Enzo kind of continues to rise a little bit as he continues to get those attacking threats. But yeah, I'd made the same pivot. I went from Rodgers the day before he dropped to Ahmad when he rose, and I think it was a perfect pivot, smart move. And it's just easy because the fixtures are better and he's at much better form than Rodgers is right now.
Yeah, good. The next tough question, which you got pretty wrong last week, but let's talk about it this week. For me, the only captain pick, and I don't see another option this week, is other than Mo Salah, who's fit, who's rested. Tottenham, I think, with a lot of defensive injuries. I think Udogie got injured as well, and they're not sure who's going to play left back. Yeah. So I just think Salah's looks probably, I can see that game being like a 2-2, 3-3. I mean, that's too much credit to Spurs, probably. I think Liverpool will still win. But I think Salah will. I think it will be a tough contested game, and I think there's going to be a lot of goals, especially if there's an early goal. So I can see Salah being involved. So for me, it feels like the easiest pick to go with is Salah, but keen to get your view.
See, it's funny. I wanted to go back to Palmer with the Everton fixture. It's a good one, right? But that may have to be a personal team decision for me and go with Salah for our team because it just makes sense, right? As good as Tottenham can be at times, they are awful defensively and have been and concede a ton of goals. And that's why Salah is a great option, especially with the fact that he was rested midweek. So he's not going to be dealing with fatigue or playing multiple games in the week. Not that I'm overly concerned, but it's just great to see him actually get some rest because he hasn't had that throughout the season. So I'm actually on board. I think captaining Salah makes a lot of sense and a great move for us. But would you consider anybody else in terms of captaincy? You have Saka at Crystal Palace, you have Palmer at Everton, or maybe you want to go another direction, or are you kind of just all in on Salah this week?
I was looking through my team, and it's like out of the big hitters, Haland I don't want to captain because he's just shit, and Villa are a decent team to play away. I
think Isak is probably the one, right, that you'd consider away at Ipswich.
I would say either I quite like Isak against Ipswich away, and I like Palmer against Chelsea away. I probably wouldn't go with Saka or anyone else other than Salah. And I just think Salah, with Liverpool expecting to score the most goals, 2.4, I just don't see the upside in risking it against Mo Salah this week.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Isak was really the other one I was potentially considering if you want a differential captain. Some people captained him last week, and obviously it really paid off with how poorly we got from Palmer and Salah. So, again, that's really the only concern for me is would you want to go Isak as more of a differential? But we've been doing pretty good nailing the captain, and I'm definitely on board with you. I think that Salah is the answer this week, and we could go another direction, but I think I may do that for my personal team because when I do, it usually works out for this team. So I'll probably do that. And it'll pay off for us with Salah as our main captain. He's been great this year, so no reason to go away from him this week.
Perfect. Last thing I wanted to talk about, and it's something which we've been backwards and forwards on a lot, is that fixture run in the bottom left-hand side. Looks really, really good, especially when... Do you know what team it is?
I don't know. Playing Villa this week. I'm not sure.
Yep. Man City. This is Man City's fixture run. So after Villa this week, you've got Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. And it's a question which just looks a little bit too good. It's Erling Haaland next week with Everton at home. Not the best captain option. And then when he gets his form back, he's then going into Leicester away and West Ham at home. I'm really liking Erling Haaland back in the team from next week. So it's just a little segue into let's start thinking about it. Especially imagine he scores against Villa straight into that fixture run. I think he's going to become, essential again. That's just a prediction on my side.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is that I have Jackson and Isak as my main two forwards, and I've been trying desperately to find a way to keep those two and bring in Haland. It doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many guys I take out, it just doesn't work. But for our team, it could be an option, and it's something I've been really thinking about. He's only, 37% started right now. So, again, he's not quite differential. But if you were to pivot from Saka to Haland, which is something we've discussed a lot, at least pivoting off of Saka, who's still 45-50% owned by a lot of people, and I think he still saw a couple price rises throughout the week. Yeah, he's 44% versus Haland's 37, like he is a bit of a differential there. And if you did want to go and captain him with the 14.9 price, it's still a lot. But if you can make it work, I'm definitely on board with it. I don't know if we can make it work for our team this week or heading into next week, but it's something I've been heavily considering. I think a lot of people should. It's just difficult with the defense because I look at defense as basically one of two options. I want Liverpool or I want Arsenal as like my main defenders. And then I might have a Lewis Hall. You know, we talked about Matty Cash with him playing right wing and obviously having defense eligibility. Yeah. And then a Colwell if that's kind of a way you want to go. But I am pretty firmly on board that I want one, if not two Arsenal players, maybe a Liverpool asset as well. But up top, Haland is definitely an option.
Nice. Well, I mean, that's a nice roundup. That was everything I had that I want to flag this week. I think the other thing which we need to do is have a little look at our team and let's get it ready. Is it the week that we use all of our free transfers finally?
We could. I mean, we have the 5 free transfers. We have to figure out our solution for Ait-Nouri. I think we have to have a conversation about Bruno Fernandes because we don't like his role. You said you transferred him out already. And then Semenyo potentially taking out Cunha as well and kind of the pieces that you want to kind of put in place and how you want it to work. Who is your first transfer that you think we have to have in for this team right now?
It's a tough question. I just think we need to get rid of Ait-Nouri, and I think that's a lot of money locked up for a similar defender, and I'd probably want Robinson. I think he's 4.8 though.
He's 4.8.
I do think as well that Semenyo to Iwobi, like you mentioned, is also really nice. I'm kind of on board with like the Fulham fixture run. Like they've been playing like prime Barcelona, and so I've seen some passages of play which just look absolutely fantastic. Iwobi seems to be, really thriving in this Fulham system. So I quite like him and Robinson.
Yeah.
I think Cunha, if we don't hear anything on the ban, I like him at Leicester away is actually pretty great. But I don't know if it's worth us taking that risk and just getting rid of him for now. At which point, like the only other strikers we really want to get is either Haland or Jackson.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues, right? So we're over budget now, but we can obviously make that work with the players we have. We could go to Jackson, right? So if we want to just make that easy replacement and go to Jackson, then we could go down to Ahmad as well, and that will work because we already talked about how we want to bring him into the team if we can. And then that does leave us with 1.7 million and one free transfer. Now, one of the things I was considering is taking Colwell or Digne and going up to a Gabriel or a Timber, right? And just kind of solidifying the defense a little bit more. Because how do you feel about Colwell right now? Obviously, the fixtures are still very good for Chelsea. Very limited in terms of attacking threat. And we kind of know that. So he's either 6 points or 2 points pretty much every week. Would you prefer to have someone else in that spot? Because heading into this week, we could just run Colwell, Hall, and Robinson and probably be fine because we're fine playing Hall again. He was great last week. And they have Ipswich. Or do you want to maybe move a Digne or a Colwell up to a Arsenal asset? That way we have Arsenal defender plus Raya and kind of double up in that respect.
Yeah, I think as it is now is actually quite nice. I don't think it's worth us taking the risk and doubling up on Arsenal in a fixture where they're probably not going to... They conceded 2 goals against Palace last night. And I think in a week where most of the strong teams are playing away, having Robinson at home at Southampton, Hall, who just got 15 points at Ipswich, and Colwell against a pretty poor attacking side in Everton is probably about as good as you're going to get in the defence with Raya in goal. Obviously, I think with Gabriel and Trent are probably the 2 premiums that everyone kind of is looking to bring into their team. But like you say, you mentioned Trent playing 60 minutes. Tottenham are bound to score against Liverpool. And therefore, I think, there's no one that I'm really, really excited to bring in. And I don't think we need to make a transfer just for the sake of it this week. I think we probably reassess the defense again next week. I do think we need to have a conversation about whether we want Saka longer term. In my team, I think I'm keeping him because I've got so much value tied up in him. But he just doesn't seem to be as prolific as he has been in previous seasons. He's getting and if you take out the assists from corners, which isn't a sustainable source of assists, just open play. It seems like he's kind of like cutting in, playing through players. I think with Odegaard back, they're starting to tick a little bit more, but it doesn't seem like the short, snappy football that Arteta was playing like a season, 2 seasons ago. So I think there's a question about whether we need Saka and whether it's a point of maybe we just assess it this week and leave it, and then we maybe bring in Haland next week against Everton at home. Because for me, 10.6 million for a player that's getting, 3.2
No attacking returns in the last three.
Two really good game weeks, but then 4 poor ones. It's just not the consistency that. And I think Saka as a player historically in FPL, like, just will bank you 8 points every game week from like either a goal or an assist, and he ticks along quite nicely. When he's not doing that, his price point does look really doesn't quite match, the performances.
Yeah, so my only question to you then, do you want to try and build it out right now? Like maybe we don't put Jackson in the team and we try and get Haland in, because the only issue is if we want to get him in next week and we only have 2 transfers, we'll probably end up taking a hit because we'll probably need to make at least 3 to get him in the team. Even dropping Saka may not be enough to bring Haland into the team.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? I think ideally, I don't know if this would work, but I would want my front 3 as Jackson, Isaac, and Haland.
Yeah, that's when it gets tough because we're only dropping Pedro and he's 5'7", and then the rest of the team.
Can you drop out Pedro and see what it leaves us with if we bring in Jackson as well?
So you want to bring in? Okay, let's see.
Okay, you're stressed now with the budget.
Now we're really thin, right? Because we have 2.8 mil with this present construction. And we'd have to get rid of at least probably Digne for sure, and maybe even Caldwell as well, and go super thin in defense, or pivot down from Raya.
It doesn't quite work. I forgot how expensive that big man was up front.
Yeah, because here even we could bring in. We can't bring in. Oh, we could bring in Enzo actually, but someone of that price point in the midfield, and it would work, and we could do that. But I think the only concern is based off the transfers we were already looking at, to then bring in Haland next week, I think is tough, right? Because you're just going to need 2 or 3 to make the money work. And so with us using 5 this week, I think it can work and you can manipulate it. But I think heading into next week, and if you haven't kind of banked some transfers, you're going to need to have multiples if that's the move you want to make.
Yeah, completely agree. Okay, so this week I think we're probably going to look to bring in Robinson, Iwobi, Ahmad maybe. And I think we kind of wait and see on the rest then. Maybe next week it's a case of like we just struggle to get... I don't think we need to bring Haland in this week for Villa away. So maybe it's just like bank that free transfer and wait and see what we can do next week with that one.
Yeah, because then we'd be sitting with this, and then would you want to just leave Cunha and hope he plays? Because I'm totally on board with you on Robinson for Ait-Nouri. I think Iwobi from Semenyo makes a lot of sense. And even that's a move that we don't have to make necessarily, but I like it a lot. And then Ahmad is one that we have to make just for I guess we don't even have to make that. We could leave that one as Bruno, but that's when it becomes a little bit tougher because we only made this switch to make the Jackson. We have 3 million left.
Bruno in?
Yeah. Because what we did, right, if you remember,
bang on.
We don't. We don't, yeah.
That's why.
No, because Ait-Nouri was 4-7. Yeah, we don't quite have the budget to do that, so we would have to make one more move.
Yeah.
Or we just don't bring in Iwobi and just bring in Robinson.
But we don't have enough for that.
Robinson's the issue.
Exactly, yeah. This is why we hate and love FPL. The 0.1 budget, that is the worst sign you can see in all of FPL, that little red 0.1. It's so frustrating when you're so close to greatness and you can't quite achieve it. I do think it's something maybe we can have a chat about and we can do it offline. But I think this week, Robinson, Iwobi, Ahmad definitely on the cards. I do think the front 3, the best strikers you can have are Isaac and Jackson. There's no one else that really excites me, even at the price point of 6 million, which I think is Wood, Pedro. The rest of them don't look super prolific. So I think my front 3 ideally would be Haland. I know it's weird saying that at the minute, but Haland, Isaac, Jackson. I think the midfield, if you have the like Iwobi, I think is great for the next few weeks. I love Ahmad for the next few weeks. Obviously, Salah, Palmer. I think Saka is one which just doesn't match the price point anymore. But in the absence of anyone else right now, I think, it's another, he might absolutely pop off against Palace. And I like our defence with the balance of Robinson, who has great fixtures, great attacking threat. Hall, who has great fixtures, great attacking threat. Colwell, I do agree with you. Like, I would much rather if that was Cucurella or someone like Matty Cash or someone with more attacking output. But I think for the fixtures, the balance of having him and Raya is actually quite nice, and I think it's something that we don't really need to address at the minute.
Yeah, it's not a need for us at the moment. It'd be nice to make that switch, but again, as we've kind of talked about the last few weeks, it's just kind of burning a transfer for the sake of getting a slightly more ideal team, but it's not going to make a big difference for our points in the long run. We're going to have Salah captain this week. We can kind of discuss some future moves and kind of how we want to do it. But the Robinson transfer, I think, makes a ton of sense. I think we could even look at keeping Semenyo in the team and just pivoting down from Bruno to Iwobi, right? Like, that's another option for us as well. We would have a lot of money left over because I think that would still leave us with 2.5 mil. But it's a small move now to kind of get the better fixtures and then move towards a bigger move later on. We want to get Haland in the team. That could be another option depending on what your team looks like right now. And then we would just start probably the front three. And then at some point, we'll probably have to get rid of Pedro because he's not playing well, but he's so cheap. He's kind of like, what's the point of getting rid of him for right now? But I actually don't even hate the fixture run. Like, it's okay for the next two. And then you'll probably want to get him out before the Villa game.
Yeah, I think the Pedro experiment this year has just been it hasn't gone right. Man. And I'm like, I brought him in, he got injured, he's not playing. Like, I cannot wait to get João Pedro out of my team again. And I can't believe I fell for bringing him in for the second time this season. So, yeah. But otherwise, I think this was a pretty insight. It felt quite therapeutic to go through this week with you, JRich.
Yeah, this is one of those weeks, honestly, where I think as few moves as you can make is going to be better off for the long run. You know, we banked a lot of transfers, so we can just kind of move some things around, make some budgetary decisions, and really just kind of lean on the better fixtures and slightly more informed players. But if you don't have that many transfers, like, I wouldn't go crazy. I wouldn't take a hit this week especially. I just don't think it's worth it. But we kind of laid out how we want to build the team going forward, like we've kind of done the last few weeks. It's just finding the right time to strike and make that big move to bring in a Haland. But that... honestly, my number one tip is if you can get Haland in the team very soon, I think it's a really good decision because I don't feel like it's one that people are making right now. I think they're still kind of off Haland because City isn't playing well and they lost again to United this past week. But I think there will be a time and it's coming very, very soon for Erling Haaland.
Yeah, and it's weird to say Erling Haaland is a differential, which just feels like such an opportunity to get, if City start to click, he is the best attacker in the best team when they're in form. Yep. And like any other season, to think that Erling Haaland is only 30 in the 30s of percentage ownership, and to think you got to think how many people started the season with him and then stopped playing FPL. There's a lot of dormant accounts that still have him. So active managers, it's probably in the 20s, which is absolutely crazy. And to think like Everton at home next week, I'm absolutely cannot wait to put the captain armband on him. But otherwise, what a exciting week ahead. We'll see what happens. I'll pass you to like your nice little outro that you do.
Thank you everybody for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe for all of our future content. Good luck in game week 17, and we'll see you guys next week. We're out. Peace.
I quite like it. I think we do it.
Then
I think it's time for
the front.
I think it's time. Just click make transfers and let's see the lineup against each other. Oh, I don't know though, because it's like Saka, Bruno, Raya are solid. We're basically getting rid of Saka for Haland, which I think is great.
And then all the other cascading moves, to make it work money-wise.
And I want Jackson in for that run. So I'm thinking let's just fucking go with it, man.